Welcome to the MMA Fan Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Stu and Blake.
Hello and welcome to the MMA Fan Podcast. I'm Stu Whiffin, sitting opposite me silent for about 5 seconds after we pressed record. Blake Harrison, you all right?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I was just changing my name on this thing because my wife's name keeps coming up in the thing, and I was just changing it. And then I saw that I think you were waiting for me to introduce.
Well, I introduced the last two, so I thought I'll let you do this one.
Mate, I'm not keeping count. I'm just like, whatever. Like, whoever introduces it, who cares?
Just a standoff.
Just us staring at each other. I hope we keep that in for the YouTube. Right. Here we go. Let's get straight into it. Oh, do you want me to ask how you are? What's going on in life?
Well, do you know what? We've had a good little run of episodes, so we've got some good stuff coming your way.
We do.
We've interviewed George Hardwick. We've had George back on the podcast. This time he's flew solo. There's no Harry Hardwick. I'm sure we'll have them both on, and certainly Harry at some point. He's just had a fight announced as well. But we've had George Hardwick on talking about his upcoming fight on the Contender season. And we had Kaelan Lochran on.
Kaelan Lochran, yeah. Lochran, not Lockney.
Lochran. But now we're struggling with a second name. When we had him on,
you're struggling with it. You're struggling with a second name. It's Kaelan Lochran. Kaelan Lochran, the Bantamweight Cage Warriors champion. Yes. He was on the show. So we'll be releasing that at some point over the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to jinx it. We're hoping to talk to Oban Elliott very, very, very soon as well, because he is also on the Dana White Contender Series. So we're going to have a couple of Dana White Contender Series episodes, kind of prelude to that with George Hardwick and Oban Elliott. And also, as I said, Bantamweight Cage Warriors champion Kaelan Lochran on the show as well, talking about his career and all things going on with him. And we are obviously about to get onto UFC 290. But before we do, if you haven't heard it yet, we very recently had on the headline act, the featherweight champion of the world, Alexander Volkanovski. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, we've had him on twice now. And the first episode was maybe about a year and a bit ago, where he spoke all about his career and his aspirations, what drives him. And it was leading up to that Ortega fight. We interviewed him while he was doing that series of The Ultimate Fighter. And that's a really great and interesting chat. I mean, if you love Alexander Volkanovski, you've got to listen to that chat.
Who don't love Alexander Volkanovski?
Who doesn't love Alexander Volkanovski? And probably Max Holloway. Maybe he doesn't love him. But other than Max, I'm sure you love Max. I'm sure you love Alexander Volkanovski. So check out that episode. And also, we did have him on only like a month ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we spoke about the lead up to this fight with Yair, how he's going to deal with Yair, and also his aspirations to rematch Islam Makhachev. So if you haven't heard that yet, I think maybe we'll try and put it on the socials this week, a link to that episode. Go and check out that episode as well, where we're speaking to Alexander Volkanovski if you haven't heard it yet. But for now, shall we get on to UFC 290, Volkanovski, Yair Rodriguez?
Let's do it. Where are we going to start on this one? Normally we have a little chat beforehand about where we're going to start. We're going to start with the main event.
Yeah, boy. Of course we are. We got to start with the big one. Volk versus Yair, interim champ versus undisputed champ. Obviously, Yair beat Josh Emmett for the interim belt on the same card that Volkanovski lost that really close fight with Islam Makhachev a little while ago now. I can't remember when that was now. Back in February or something, was it? And so now the unification bout, Yair and Volk. A few things jumped out at me about this fight. Firstly, I was not massively interested in this fight until I saw Yair beat Josh Emmett, and I was just like, oh, wow, now I sort of am. He did it in such spectacular fashion that it made me go, okay, I've got to see this fight now. Volkanovski, even though he's shorter than most of the people he fights, usually has like actually a reach advantage, or you know, he's got very long arms for someone of his size. And Yair Rodriguez is not only about 5 inches taller than him, but he has the same reach as Volkanovski as well. So I wonder if Volk will find that a little bit trickier, kind of getting on the inside or anything.
I don't want to be a real pernickety prick here.
Go on.
But he has got half an inch on Yair's reach.
Well, that's not what I saw in a tail of the tape recently. I think I saw 71 inches each, aren't they?
No, Volk's 71 and a half.
Well, there you go. And we all know
half an inch matters, mate. I'm telling you.
Hey, the men out there, we all know half an inch matters. How dare I? How dare I rob Volk of half an inch? We all know we need an extra half inch in our lives. So yeah. So there you go. Well, then maybe that won't make much of a difference then. But I thought they were both 71 inches. But there you go. How do you see this fight going? Because I suppose a lot of people out there will be thinking, "Oh, it's Volkanovski, isn't it? Like he's going to do him. It's Volkanovski. He's arguably the greatest featherweight of all time, having beaten Aldo, having beaten Max 3 times." What do you see happening in this fight?
Well, he's a heavy favourite in this fight. To echo something you said. Again, wasn't that fussed about this fight, but what Yair done to Josh Emmett, he looked so exciting, Rodriguez, in this fight. So all of a sudden, it makes this fight a far more exciting prospect. And I think one of the things that we've maybe been guilty of when talking about Volk is always sort of looking at, well, once he beats Yair, is he going to go and fight Makhachev? What's he going? It's always kind of not looking beyond Yair, and we should stress that when Volk come on the podcast, he was very respectful about that, and certainly wasn't looking past Yair Rodriguez. I think it could be a really interesting fight because Yair's fight style is it's a very difficult one to train for. I'm sure it's very kind of awkward and I do think that, however tricky it is, I think one of Volk's absolute attributes is his ability to be able to kind of sort of work with whatever's in front of him. And I think he's so well-rounded. I can see it going the distance.
Really? Yeah. Well, Yair's tough. We saw that in the Max Holloway fight, didn't we?
Yeah,
like, Yair is really tough. I could potentially see it going the distance as well, which is dangerous because we saw in Yair's fight with Korean Zombie, he was losing that fight up until literally the last second of the last round, and he threw that crazy up elbow and it knocked Korean Zombie right out. I would favour Volk in this fight, and I think we're going to have to see a more, well, not a more because he does it a lot, but I think we're going to have to see all the tools in Volk's arsenal. I think he's going to have to implement a lot of the takedowns, unlike with some of the Holloway fights and all of that, where he seems to just kickbox. I think he's really going to want to rely on some of the wrestling as well, because it just takes away the big thing that Yair has, and that is those, as you said, awkward attacks, really heavy
striking,
kicks,
isn't it?
Unorthodox, spinning kicks, flying knees, all that stuff. And if Volk can get him to the ground and just be on top of him a bit and rough him up a bit like what he did to Ortega in some of those rounds, I really, and towards the end of the Makhachev fight as well, I really think Volk will kind of really suck the life out of Yair a little bit. Every time he gets him down and can hold him down a little bit and rain down a few blows, I think that's going to really take away from Yair. I think this is a huge step up for Yair as well. I mean, we've seen that Volk is a sort of level above Max Holloway. I mean, not many people can say that ever because Max Holloway is so good. But Yair come up short against Max Holloway. Not that there's any shame in that at all. And then, the Brian Ortega fight was a weird shoulder injury. Before that, it was like Jeremy Stevens, Korean Zombie, which he was losing that fight until then. And before that, he lost to Frankie Edgar, then beat BJ Penn before that. So when you're looking at his kind of resume, it doesn't, like, Josh Emmett was a really good winner, solid winner. And that's what I said. That's what made me more excited for this fight. But prior to that, there's not really much that makes me go, he's going to really trouble Volk. And if Volk can take him down, you've got to think Volk has been training for Islam Makhachev. He's trained over the last couple of years for Brian Ortega. Yes, Yair does have some tricky, good jiu-jitsu. He submitted Josh Emmett with a triangle choke, but I don't think...
It's not at the level of them two you mentioned previously.
No, and I don't think he's going to show us anything that Volk hasn't seen before. So I think 8 times out of 10, Volk wins this fight. And so, you know, I'm picking Volk to win this fight. However, factors to consider are that I just think anyone can get hit, and Yair is the guy that will throw something that you're not expecting, that you can't train for, and that can just clip you. And whether he can get you down after that and submit, or whether he just knocks you out ground and pound because he's landed some tornado kick or something like that, that is always possible. And as we saw in the Korean Zombie fight, it's possible until the very last second of the very last round. So Volk has to be completely switched on.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to live with you. I want to see Volk win just because he's just a top bloke. I mean, do you know what? I actually saw that video the other day of Yair and Max, where Max walking past the ambulance and Yair's in the back of it, and then they both just sort of jump in and have a photo together, and it's just that all three of them fellas just seem like absolute gents, and it's unfortunately someone's got to lose, and as much as that fight style is very unorthodox of Yair's, I just think that Volk gets this because he's just too well rounded. But this could be shit or bust for Yair, and you can never underestimate someone that gets that chance. Do you know what I mean? You know, I don't think Volk's looking past him, as I mentioned earlier. But I don't know. Like, it's going to be difficult to train for that Yair sort of striking, but I'm leaning on Volk.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you make a good point there. I think there's some fighters that you could go, they've been, you know, the greatest in their division for a while. They've moved up in weight class and really given a champ that everyone thought that they would have no chance against, giving them a real run for their money, to the point where some people believe Volk won that fight against Islam Makhachev.
Yeah.
And now their sights are on getting the glory, becoming a double champ, rematching Islam Makhachev. Yeah. And it's very possible that they could overlook Yair Rodriguez because they did so well in a fight that people didn't expect them to. And they've been so brilliant up until now that they could overlook this young lad that, when you look at their resume, hasn't necessarily done an equivalent to where you'd go, oh, they're going to really trouble Volkanovski. But I think Volk is too professional and too humble, and he has too many of the right people around him for him to underestimate Yair. I think they know what they're doing. They brought in Blood Diamond, who I think is one of the guys from Izzy's gym from Sin City Kickboxing, to kind of train with a lot, who's like a very flashy kickboxer. So they're already prepping as best they can for Yair. Although, I mean, flashy is like, just because you get a flashy striker doesn't mean he's the same as the other flashy striker, because the thing that makes someone like Yair so amazing to watch, he's like, if you design a computer game character, or if you design someone on like your UFC game or something like that, you're like, you probably are not designing someone to go and wrestle people, take them down and beat them up. You want to create friggin', I don't know, like Law from Tekken, or like Ryu from Street Fighter. It's like, you want someone where you press the buttons and they start spinning around and doing all these highlight reel kicks and knockouts and stuff like that. So you can't, just because you bring in someone that's a flashy striker doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing exactly the same types of things as Yair. And even if they're studying him to try and emulate it, it's still not exactly the same. So there's an element of danger in this fight. That is what's really intriguing me, is that I think Volk could dominate a decision here. He could 50-45 him, absolutely. But even if he's won 4.5 rounds, like with like almost a Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman thing, I could still be on the edge. If Yair looks like he's still got some power in him and he's willing to jump and flying knee or spinning kick or whatever it is, I'll still be watching that in like what would it be? Like the 23rd minute, going, this could all still go wrong for Volk. There's still Yair could still pull this out of the bag. And that's what makes it a fascinating fight to watch, I think. And also Volk's approach to it. Does he go, no, I can show you on the feet I'm better than you? or does he implement the wrestling?
That's my thing.
Yeah.
That's my thing. Like, is the showman in Volk going to come through? Of like, look, I'm going to beat him at his own game here. Because you're right. The wrestling favours Volk. To get him down and ground and pound him. He's definitely a place that I'm sure Volk's been way more comfortable than Yair. But is Volk going to think, main event, I'm Volk, I'm better than this guy. Let's start teeing off and see what happens. I'd love to see it because I think it'd be exciting, but I don't. What you said about his trainers and that, I think that will also be reflected there. They're going to be like, mate, why are you going to play him his own game? Like, But what are you smiling at?
No, I just thought when you just said like, oh, I'm Volk, I was like, oh, imagine saying I'm Volk. That must be great. Imagine just waking up in the morning, looking in the mirror, and you're like, oh, I'm Alexander Volk. Like quantum. Imagine if you quantum leap it. Imagine if you were able to quantum leap and just be Volk for a day. No. Just like, Volk, I'm amazing.
He doesn't know, does he?
I'm best on the planet. No, but I would. If I got to quantum leap into Volk, for any young viewers that don't know what quantum leap is, Google it now. If you could just quantum leap into Volk for a day and just be like, oh, I'm Alexander Volkanovski for a day. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Well, I would tell people to go and listen to the first episode when we had Volk on, because he talks about getting recognised. And I quote loosely, when people go and say, hey, he's like, I just thought that was someone I went to school with. Then I'm like, oh, no, fuck, it's a UFC thing. And he forgets he's a UFC champ. And he just presumes when people recognise him, they're schoolmates.
Is Volk Swedish? I was like,
oh, here we go.
What's your accent there?
Have you been waiting for about 160 episodes for me to do an impression, haven't you? After me calling you out for all of your sounding Welsh.
And yet when I try and do Welsh for a part, it comes out Jamaican. It's terrible. Terrible. I would need to get better at my Welsh accent. No, I think this should be a great fight. I think, it could be Volk dominating, but again, you just never know with Yair. I'm biased. I want Volk to win. I think he's such a great bloke. I mean, the other thing is, if Yair loses, I also really want the Makhachev fight as well, by the way. I really want Volk Makhachev too. I thought that was such an interesting fight, and I'd love to see it again. But Volk is 34. I think he's the oldest featherweight champion by a long time now. Yair's only 30. I think if Yair loses this fight, I don't think it's shit or bust for him or anything. I think Yair could find himself back in a title shot quite easily. I think he's, an incredibly exciting fighter that the UFC will want to keep promoting. He's only 30 years old. He's got a long way ahead of him. So I think you could definitely see Yair challenge for a title again after this fight if it doesn't go his way.
Let's move on to co-main.
Co-main. Another cracker and another Mexican champion. Brandon Moreno versus Alejandro Pantoja. That was not Welsh.
There's good backstory to this, isn't there?
Great
Obviously,
backstory.
He's got the win over Moreno. I mean, was
two
18, like
two wins over Moreno.
Oh, really? What, he beat him in 2018? He beat him before
he beat him in the Ultimate Fighter, so it was one of those like exhibition fights. But he beat him in their series of the Ultimate Fighter, and then back in 2018, when he beat him, that is when Moreno got cut. Because if you remember, Moreno got cut from the UFC, and it was the loss to Pantoja that meant that the UFC cut him. And then obviously he fought his way back to the UFC and become a champion, which in itself is such a phenomenal story. From very short period of time, he was cut from the UFC and then became the UFC champion. I mean, I love Brandon Moreno. I love the fact that he loves Lego. I love the fact that his family make piñatas. I love the fact that he just seems like a really nice bloke. Like when Davidson Figueiredo pushed him at the weigh-ins, he was like, oh, that's a bit much, and then just beat his ass a day later. And I love his style. His scrambles are so good. His boxing is so good. He's just a brilliant fighter. He comes to finish fights as well. 2 finishes of Davison Figueiredo in their tetralogy. A finish of Kai Kara France recently as well. I mean, he's a fantastic fighter. I absolutely love watching him. And as I say, what a story to go from you've been cut and then you come back and you become the champion. Phenomenal stuff. It's
It's
sort of got vibes of Adesanya Pereira. It's not quite at that level because neither of them are as big a star as Izzy, and because the rivalry isn't as it is quite one-sided, but it doesn't have the star power
it's not
of the
salacious
Izzy
as what
fights.
we've seen.
No.
With there was so much, and the fact that obviously he got fast tracked to that Izzy shot because it was so marketable, and yeah, I mean we've seen it time and time again. Unfortunately, with the smaller weights, it just doesn't seem to kind of have the gravitas of some of the bigger boys. I don't, it's a shame, but it does seem to sort of be that way. But this has all the makings of an
you see what I mean
war.
about it having. You see what I mean about having like slight vibes of it, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely, of course, yeah. He's the champ's been beaten twice by this guy, and so it's super exciting. But he last lost 5 years ago, and as you said, like he got cut from there. But we have seen Brandon Moreno, evolve into an absolute, legend, absolute, beast of a champ, and I think this could be an absolute war. This one.
Yeah.
And will it? We probably had these conversations when we was talking about Izzy. Will Brandon have that kind of mindset of like, he's got my number, like he's 2-0, and I think we're going to see a very, very different Brandon Moreno on Saturday than what we saw in 2018, and I think he's he ain't going to let that belt go now, and I do think Pantoja's a very dangerous fighter, but I don't think he wins this one.
No, I mean, look, I went back and I rewatched the last fight between Moreno and Pantoja. And after one round, I just thought there's not really much point with watching this anymore because Brandon Moreno is such a different fighter. He's evolved so much over these 5 years. Like defensively, he's so much better. He was getting clipped all over the place in parts of that fight with Pantoja. He's defensively way better. His striking is way more accurate and crisper. He doesn't have that style that he's got now that I love, where he kind of just jockeys from side to side a little bit and all of that. He didn't have that as much, and his hands will kind of out more, way more looping shots and all that. And I think Moreno now is a far superior fighter to what he was back then. If Pantoja thinks he's getting the Brandon Moreno of 5 years ago, he's going to be in big trouble because he's way better now than what he was back then.
But Pantoja would have improved as a fighter in them 5 years as well. So, is it a level playing field? Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, has he improved that much? I think that's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm just going to pull him up here and see, because one thing I would say about Pantoja, he's not massively active. Like, he is one fight a year for the last couple of years. That doesn't give you huge momentum going into the into a title fight like this. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Manel Cap, good win. Brandon Royval has aged really well. Brandon Royval is looking really good at the moment. And then Alex Perez, which is maybe less good given Perez's kind of recent run of form, I think. But yeah, one thing I will say with Pantoja is I think Pantoja regularly goes to his grappling, tries to take your back and do that. Now, Brandon Moreno is incredibly good when it comes to scrambling out of those situations. And again, I think the 5 years he's had, he's improved his striking massively. It's so obvious, the striking improvements. If you go back and watch Moreno Pantoja, and then you watch Moreno versus Figueiredo, or in any of those fights, it seems the improvement is so huge in his striking. But I think you can see it in his grappling as well, the scrambles and the way he moves around with his grappling. But I do think Pantoja will have the edge in his grappling. I also wonder if Pantoja might be just a bit stronger as well. That's something that we're unsure about. Pantoja, again, 33 now, which in those lighter weight classes, it might be now or never for
Has he fought a 5-rounder
Pantoja.
before?
I'm sure he has, but I'd have to double check that, and I can double check that in a second.
Because that's saying Brandon Moreno's that he's not had many 3-rounders, for a long time now. He's very comfortable, when it gets into them later rounds. So I think that might favour Moreno a little as well. Just that experience of fighting, the best of the best over 5 rounds in wars.
Yeah. I mean, his last 3 fights, his last decision was Manel Cap. That was a 3-round decision. And his Royval fight ended in the 2nd round, rear naked choke. Alex Perez, 1st round, rear naked choke. I think Moreno will definitely have way more experience when it comes to headlining cards and, as I say, going those 5 rounds. So going the distance, you're right, that will massively favour Brandon Moreno, given the history of the two of them. I think that's a really good point. If it goes, the longer it goes, you would imagine it's going to favour Brandon Moreno. But I still think this will be a phenomenal. I'm looking at this card now, man. I'm just like, this is a cracker. We've got a great, interesting main event. We've got a co-main event that I think could be an absolute cracker. I think Brandon Moreno is really gonna give everything in this. I mean, he gives everything every time, but I just think there's going to be an extra bit of motivation because he's been beaten twice by Pantoja. And I think Pantoja will know that this is his last shot at the belt. It's taken him a long time to get to the belt. And at 33 years old, down at flyweight, this is probably his last opportunity. So I think this is going to be an absolute cracker. My heart is with Brandon Moreno. I love Brandon Moreno. However, if you can recall a certain predictions episode that we did back in December or January, whenever it was, for who would be champion at the end of this year, my flyweight pick was Alejandro Pantoja. So there's a part of me that sort of wants Pantoja to win just to rub it in Stu's face. But we shall see.
I'm leaning on Moreno. I really am. Okay, so what have we got next? Do you want to talk?
Whittaker Duplessis?
I mean, the fact that that's not a main or a co-main, I mean, that could headline any other card, and that's just... I mean,
not a pay-per-view. It's not going to headline a pay-per-view. Fight night.
Fight night then, yeah. Like, it's a great scrap, this, and I cannot wait to watch Bobby Knuckles just gas Biggest Drickus in, like, I think he'll absolutely take the wind out of his sails in the 1st round, and then I think in the 2nd round, that's all she's going to write, and Bobby Knuckles walks away with an easy win.
I just don't like the matchmaking. Just like with, what we said, the same thing about Arnold Allen and Max Holloway and all that stuff, potentially, if Topuria and Max Holloway were to happen, which I don't think it will. Like, it's just Whittaker and Holloway, these people that have fought the champions, more than once and lost on multiple occasions to the champions. They're in such difficult positions because they need fights, but equally, you don't want to give them the person that could be the number 1 contender, because it then just halts a contender. And then what do you do with the champion? Give them that same fight can happen if that contender beats the champion. So for me, I don't like this fight. As a fight, as an individual fight, I like it. As a matchmaking for that whole division, I think it's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely atrocious. You've got a fight in a pay-per-view event in September happening where the rumor is the only person that's going to be headlining that card is Israel Adesanya. Why have you not just said Dricus Duplessis versus Israel Adesanya in Australia? Do I feel like Dricus has 100% earned it? Well, it's a tricky one because middleweight is such a dodgy division, because Israel has already beaten Vettori twice, Whittaker twice, Cannonier once, and, Costa and all these people. He's already done them. Pereira's moving up to light heavy. I would have done Pereira for the trilogy. I think that was the fight to make. But Pereira's now moving up to light heavyweight, so that's not going to happen. So just give him Dricus in Australia. He would absolutely smoke him. But you know what? It could be really fun to watch, and it'd be a great highlight moment. And Izzy in Australia, it makes him the big superstar and all that stuff. That is what they should have done with this. Instead, you've now got Dana White has said the winner of this fight gets Izzy for the belt next. Well, hang on a minute, but the September card's only 2 months away, and that's when you want that fight to happen. So if this fight somehow goes 3 rounds, are either of those fighters going to be ready for Izzy in 2 months' time? Is that fair on them as contenders? And if they can't quite fight, who are we left with to fight Izzy? Sean fucking Strickland, who did win at the weekend. Yeah, lovely, great. But that guy just chats so much nonsense, and I just don't really like him. And I don't massively care for his fight style that much either. Like, I know he got a knockout win, but that's only because Abus Magomedov almost basically sort of did a Dricus du Plessis, only he lost rather than just knock out a win. He just gassed out. So
and for that first round, absolutely bossed over Sean Strickland.
Yeah. Sean Strickland has got nothing for Izzy. At least Dricus, I think that could kind of be like fun for a round. Like, because I think Dricus will just come at him, and either Izzy will just slip something and smack him on the chin and knock him out super quick, or it could be kind of like Izzy going, oh, Jesus, this guy's just going for me like some berserker for a bit, and then second round happens and he just absolutely smokes him. I don't know.
Backstory there, isn't there? Izzy's made it clear that he wants Dricus. Right? That comment.
Izzy's made it exactly. There is backstory. Do I like the idea of a build up to a fight being sort of propelled, or at least kind of exploited by the fact that there's talk of like who's the most African, when you're talking about a white South African man talking about a black Nigerian man that has also moved on to obviously New Zealand. But that is very problematic, and I don't think MMA as a sport should be trying to go down that road at all. Do I think they would go down that road? Absolutely. So that would be the worry for me, is the build up to the fight would be tainted with, well, racism effectively is just to put it bluntly. And I think the MMA Twitter, I like to think a lot of the listeners to this show are quite conscientious, open-minded, good thinkers that wouldn't be sucked in by all that nonsense. But I think a lot of MMA Twitter, when you scroll through, would be sucked in by that and would be spouting off a lot of, problematic shit. But will the fight be fun? Yeah, probably would be, for as long as it lasted. But I mean, back on. Go on, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say back to Whittaker. I'm a huge fan of Robert Whittaker. I think he's an absolute killer and just a fantastic example of an MMA fighter. Great sportsman. And can you see this going any other way than what I said? I think Whittaker, he's way too good. And Dricus has fast tracked there. A win over Darren Till, win over Brunson. I don't
see that as fast tracked. I see that as
just
middleweight is flaws in the division. Brunson was probably ranked 5th when he fought him. It's not his fault that Brunson's 5th. And you can't say he's had favourable matches if to get a title shot now he's fighting Robert Whittaker. So I'll give him that credit. And I think that, as I say, he's had some sort of fun fights, but in weird ways. Fights where you're like, both these guys are absolutely knackers, because Dricus has smashed Brunson around for a bit, and then Dricus is really tired. Or Darren Till got like 10-7 in that first round, from what I remember. Sort of came back and won the second round because Dricus was so tired. And then Dricus was able to land a really sloppy takedown and just hold Darren down and do some damage. And that was it, I think.
Rear naked choke he got him with in the end.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a weird one, wasn't it?
And that's
the state of the division.
Yeah, and that wasn't a Darren Till that was sending shockwaves through the division at that point.
No. I think the one thing we have to think about is, and I was watching the Countdown episode recently, one thing that has been talked about in like the MMA media or whatever is that Dricus has mentioned quite a lot that the cardio issues he has, the reason he's so open-mouthed and breathing through his mouth after just 2 minutes, is because he's had nasal problems. He was getting no airflow through one nostril, very limited airflow through the other nostril, and he's now had nasal surgery. So according to his team, he's going to be a very different Dricus du Plessis. He's going to be able to fight way harder. According to them, they threw out some statistic that he was only getting like 8% oxygen or something like that, which sounds like a load of bollocks, but I don't know. So I don't know. I don't think the nasal surgery is going to make that much of a difference. I think his body is quite muscular, and I think that's just how he fights. And I think that'll be it, really. So I do think we'll get a similar Dricus du Plessis that comes out hard, that could catch Rob Whittaker with something early on. But if he doesn't finish the fight in the first 3.5, 4 minutes, I think we'll see him massively fade, and Robert Whittaker will just go to town on him. And either Whittaker will win a lopsided decision, or he will finish him late in the second or early in the third round, because Dricus is just so tired. And then we look forward to Whittaker Adesanya 3, maybe, which, I mean, I love Robert Whittaker. I do want to see him fight for a belt again, but I don't know if I'm up for him, Adesanya, right now. I think I want Adesanya to fight some fresh contenders. And that means we might end up having Sean Strickland fight for the belt, which will be
I'm not interested.
A weird one.
To echo what you said, that guy talks so much shit. Like, I'm not interested in Sean Strickland, mate. Like,
no. But that's what might happen. That might be what happens.
I know. Like, I'll have Dricus versus Sean Strickland, and you get a really good first round, and then it'll be one of the worst fights in history. Right. Dan Hooker, Jalen Turner.
Yes, please.
Like, I mean, I'm a fan of Jalen Turner, former guest of the show. Dan Hooker, obviously, we're friends of, and fans of.
I like to think of us as friends.
Absolutely.
We're friends.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you've
been desperate to be friends with Dan Hooker from the very first episode, mate.
I have. I love Dan Hooker.
He's game Dan Hooker, isn't he? And,
mate, yeah.
And I'm on board. Never in a dull fight, and I don't expect this to be dull by any stretch of the imagination. How are you picturing this one going, mate?
The thing that really struck me, I remember seeing a video of Jalen Turner doing some sparring in Abu Dhabi with Hamzat Chimaev, and they looked the same size. Like, how this guy makes lightweight, I will never understand. He is 6'3", and he's big. He's not tall and skinny. Like, he's big. Like, how he makes lightweight, I have no idea. And Dan Hooker has fought at featherweight. I think there's going to be a bit of a size and power discrepancy here in Jalen Turner's favor, and that worries me for Dan a little bit. I mean, Jalen was on a 5-fight win streak up until we lost a very, very close split decision to Mateusz Gamrot, and I'm a big Mateusz Gamrot fan. I think this is great matchmaking. I will bemoan the matchmaking when it's bad. I think this is really good matchmaking. Go on, what do you want to say?
What I like is his last win was over Brad Riddell. So
yeah,
there's a nice little bit of backstory there as well.
Oh, yeah, a little bit of city kickboxing backstory there if you want that. I think this is a perfect bit of matchmaking, because Dan Hooker is one of these guys that, when it comes to like the top 5 guys, he doesn't quite stand up to him. Obviously, there's Makhachevs, the Chandlers, the Poiriers, and people like that. But when it comes to people trying to crack the top 15 and top 10 and really show that they are, the top 5 material, he's dealt with the Hack Parasts, and I'm trying to think of whoever else it was.
Paul Felder, Ally Quinter,
Ally Quinter,
Gilbert Burns.
Yes, those guys that couldn't quite get into. I mean, Gilbert Burns, obviously, this was lightweight before he went into welterweight, which was clearly the division for him. But Hooker's got good wins over guys. And we don't know quite who Jalen Turner is yet. I think I do know, and I think he is a potential top 5 guy. Although lightweight has got so many good wrestlers in it now, and but I think Jalen Turner, being 6'3" and an incredible kickboxer and the powerhouse that he is, I think he could cause some real problems at a lightweight for people. So I think I would be favouring him in this fight as much as I do love Dan. But one thing is, Dan is tough as anything, man. And he could take some big shots and then come back and start putting it on Jalen. You just don't know. Jalen's there to be hit at times. Like, he's not got amazing striking defense.
I feel that Dan takes a round or so to really kind of snuggle into the fight, because you look at Chandler, you look at Arnold, and it was just bosh straight out, and it was just on the back foot. And I'm going to lean with Dan Hooker in this fight. Because I kind of liked what you said there about, when he does fight the top five guys, it doesn't ever seem to kind of go the way he wants it to go. But I think on the peripheries of that, I think, he seems to be more comfortable there. And you're talking about Jalen Turner's, kickboxing and stuff. We're talking about Dan Hooker from City Kickboxing. There's no flaws in his striking, and so I'm going to lean towards Dan Hooker.
All right, I'm going to go against you. I'm going to go Jalen Turner. And I think what you're saying about Dan maybe taking, I think if he weathers the storm that could be coming in the first round, he might surprise everyone, and come back and win it. But I can also see Jalen finishing him early, and actually, because I just really do rate Jalen Turner. But we'll see. As you say, I mean, Hooker's there training with Izzy, so he's well versed in training with good, hard hitting, talented kickboxers. So he might be able to deal with it very, very well. But that's why this is good matchmaking, because we'll see. This is Jalen Turner as good as some people thinks he is? And if he gets through Dan Hooker, we're like, all right, let's give you to some of the other top guys or whatever and see where you're at. So yeah, I think it's a good test. Bo Nickel, Trayshawn Gore.
I don't know. I haven't really got a lot to say about this, because I've watched Bo Nickel in one fight, and yes, it's very apparent that the UFC and Dana are very excited about him. But I haven't got a lot to say. He looked solid in his last outing. In his debut, and I'm presuming we're going to see him, beat a few kind of names that aren't that exciting. I still always a little bit disappointed when people that they get excited about, they push through to the point where they're on main cards, when there's other fighters I think maybe could be on that main card. But I guess it's just a business model of the UFC. But yeah, I'm not overly excited about this fight. There's way too much stuff on that card for me to get overexcited about Bo Nickel.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think it's a North American thing. I think it's, he's a national champion wrestler. It's a big deal over there. I think he was at Penn State, which is like their big kind of university for wrestling and all that kind of stuff. So he's a sort of star within that combat sports world already, but he's only going into his 5th pro fight, 27 years old. I mean, middleweight is in such a place where I'm like, oh, fuck it, just fast track him. Just do it. I don't like that he's also on like the countdown episodes usually are like, you've got the main event taking up, say, 25 minutes, half an hour of it. Then you've got the co-main taking up 20 minutes of it. And then they have like a featured third fight that takes up 10 minutes of it. In this countdown episode, they had the main, the co-main, the featured bout being Dricus du Plessis and Robert Whittaker, and they still had Bo Nickel and Trayshawn Gore as well, which, if you're going to do that for lots of cards and have young fighters on it, I'm kind of for that. It builds up people's kind of knowledge of these fighters, gets us interested in the fights, and I think that's a good thing. But I don't like that they just seem to be doing stuff like that for Bo Nickel, really. Maybe they did it with Raul Rosas Jr. as well. I can't remember really if he was on their countdown episode. But it just makes me go, I don't know. It just, I just don't want him to get too much kind of favoritism. But having said that, because middleweight is in the situation it's in where Izzy is desperate for new contenders, and the contenders that he's looking at potentially are people like Dricus and Sean Strickland and all that stuff, I'm a bit like, Well, fuck it. Fast track someone like Bo Nickel. Like if he beats Trayshawn Gore, I know he's only going into his 5th pro fight. If he beats someone like Trayshawn Gore, I'd almost go on then, give him the ranked guy. Do it. Give him a top 15 middleweight, and let's see if he's as special as everyone thinks he really is. Because if he loses and gets a setback, he's only 27. He's in middleweight division. It's not like he's a flyweight or anything. He can still then, you can throw him in. I've not got the rankings in front of you. You can throw him in at middleweight with someone that's 15th, 14th, whatever it might be. And then if he loses, you go, okay, let's slow it back down. Let's give him 3 build-up fights again, and then see if he grows and can get into that. I mean, looking at middleweight now, Chris Curtis, Andre Muniz is fighting Paul Craig in Paul Craig's middleweight debut in London. But you've got people like maybe a Jack Hermanson, a Chris Curtis, an Andre Muniz, people like that I go, give him that kind of step up and just see. And again, if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. He can go back to fighting smaller people. Like Trayshawn Gore was on an Ultimate Fighter series. Was he on the he lost to Brian Battle maybe in the final of this series with Ortega Volkanovski, I think. I might be wrong. I think it was that one. And Trayshawn Gore's had like 3 or 4 fights in the UFC. I think he's only won 1 or 2 or something. So yeah, so I mean, if he beats Trayshawn Gore, particularly if he beats him in spectacular fashion, which is what the UFC want, they want him on the main card, opening it up. Everyone's eyes are on Bo Nickel, and he goes out there, takes him down, and submits him or ground and pounds him within 2 minutes. That is what the UFC want. And if he gets through Trayshawn Gore in that kind of fashion, I just go, screw it. Yeah, let's make this some kind of interesting Rocky story. A guy with only a few pro fights is getting thrown into the mix, and he could fight the champion in a year or two's time if he gets a few fights. I don't know. I mean, maybe that goes against a lot of what I say in other times where people do have to earn it. But I say middleweight's weird. It's not lightweight. It's not featherweight. It's not a stacked division. So, and sometimes stories like this can be fun. And Izzy is starved for proper good title challenges. So, and it's an interesting dynamic. I think Izzy would smoke Bo Nickel right now, because I don't think Bo would be able to get close to him in terms of the striking enough to implement the wrestling. But there's certainly a storyline there of Bo Nickel is this incredible, unbelievable state, world or national champion wrestler and all this stuff. He's got all the credentials in wrestling, that he could cause Izzy some problems. If he gets hold of Izzy could be in big trouble. So give him 2-3 more fights, and then screw it. Make if he wins them, make him a title fight.
Absolutely. There's not loads more fights that I think we need to really dig into on this card, but we do need to talk about Nico Price versus Ruthless Robbie Lawler. I've just pulled up Robbie Lawler's his fight stats, and obviously I'm speaking on behalf of you here, but we're huge fans of Robbie Lawler. An absolute, absolute great. Robbie Lawler obviously has just come off that loss to Brian Barberena, and apart from the strange thing that was Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler, a loss to Neil Magny, a loss to Colby Covington, a loss to Ben Askren, a loss to Rafael dos Anjos, a win over Cowboy, lost to Tyron Woodley. I never realised Robbie Lawler had that many losses over the last few years. I didn't realise that apart from Diaz, he was just getting beaten in every single fight.
Yeah, I wrote it down as making some notes the other day. Since losing the title to Tyron Woodley, he has won 2 out of 7 fights.
That's
and
crazy.
those were Donald Cerrone and Nick Diaz. Now, Donald Cerrone at the time was probably doing all right.
Yeah.
So that's not, it's a half decent win. But Nick Diaz, that's not a great win, really, with Nick Diaz being out of the cage for 5-8 years, whatever the hell it was. It's not great reading. And Robbie Lawler is 41 years old. I think whether he wins or loses, I think I'd like to see him maybe hang him up, because he's taken a lot of damage. Even in fights that he's won, He's taken so many blows and so much damage. Obviously, the Carlos Condit fight, the Rory McDonald fight, list goes on and on, like with the absolute wars that Robbie Lawler has had, and then the knockouts, Tyron Woodley and other fights as well. I mean, it's just, it's going to start getting to a stage where it feels uncomfortable watching a Robbie Lawler fight, and I don't ever want it to get to that stage. But Nico Price is maybe good matchmaking. Nico's not. Nico's a fun fighter. This will be a war. This could be a fight of the night situation. But if he loses to Nico, particularly if he's finished, I don't think I'd feel comfortable watching Robbie Lawler fight again unless he goes on an absolute kind of legends tour against people that are also at his kind of level.
Who's there for that? Nick Diaz was the one, I guess, wasn't it? And like, what else is there? I don't know. I can't think of anything that brings to mind that excites me there. And yeah, I mean, it's not for us to tell fighters when to, when to quit. But Robbie Lawler has nothing to prove. Absolute legend.
No.
When you start looking at his resume, and it's like, he fought Frank Trigg. You think, God, how long ago was that? Like,
Frank Trigg.
You just think, like, you forget that, like, just how long Robbie Lawler has been in the UFC, and to make that comeback and become the champ, second time round and go on that absolute tear, beating, I'm trying to think who he beat. Literally beat everyone, didn't he?
Johnny Hendricks, Rory McDonald, Carlos Condit. Oh man,
Rory twice.
He had like a couple of years where he was the most exciting fighter on the UFC 100%. Roster, and he was a champion, and it's just, he was unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely superb.
So best wishes and best of luck, mate. Love to see Robbie Lawler get a win at the weekend, and I think me and you will probably be happy to see him put their mitts down in the middle of the octagon and bow out. Yeah.
Watch out for Nico Price has like a weird body frame. I don't know if you noticed, he's got like slightly odd shoulders. It's like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like people watching this, you watch Nico Price, I think it's his shoulders. He's got something going on with his shoulders where they're just formed in a weird way. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's just something that struck me. Whenever I watch Nico Price, I'm like, what's going on with his shoulders? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's strange. And I feel like I had to put that out there into the world.
Shoulders?
They just, I'd need to see an image of him right now to be able to articulate, because I remember it from watching him. Who did he fight a while back? I can't remember. I did like an MMA on point thing, and I remember watching it. I was like, he's got some strange thing going on with his shoulders, Nico Price.
Well, I'm looking at him now, and I mean, I don't know.
Is this just a topology picture?
Yeah.
No, you can't see it there. It's a weird angle there. Yeah, there's something going on. I feel like I'm going very Larry David here, but something's going on. And you look at it. You'll see something going on.
Right, listen, listeners. I want you to message us in or tweet us hashtag Nico Shoulders and let us know if you know what the fucking hell Blake's talking about.
Is it his shoulders or his ribs? It's something. I'm sure it's his shoulders. Mate. I'm sure it's his shoulders. I'm trying to think. I need to find some images of Nico Price, but there's something going on with his shoulders. The other fight that I just wanted to briefly mention, because so many people are getting high on this young lad, is Tatsuro Taira. Tatsuro Taira is 13-0. I think he's on a 3-fight UFC win streak. I believe he is a flyweight. Yep. And a lot of people have been really high on him and talking about him a lot. He's not fought anyone of real note yet, but he's very young and 23 years old, born in the year 2000. Jesus. And a lot of people are very high on him and think he could be someone that is challenging for belts in a couple of years' time. So if you want to be ahead of the game, Tatsuro Taira, check him out. He'll probably be on the Fight Pass prelims. Check him out. He is fighting Edgar Chairez, who I don't know much about, but yeah, if you want to be there early, check out Tatsuro Taira. He's, as I say, he's already on a UFC win streak of 13-0. And yeah, very good fighter.
Absolutely. So that's this Saturday, UFC 290, Volkanovski versus Rodriguez at the T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas. One last thing before we disappear. Let's talk about GamCare, Blake, because we do these episodes in partnership, a non-profit partnership with GamCare, which is a fantastic organisation that deals with the problems around gambling. And as I guess a lot of you listeners know, there's so many gambling companies that are involved in mixed martial arts events and sponsorship deals. And it's something that both Blake and I wasn't comfortable with. You know, we said from the very beginning that if we get offered anything in regards to sort of sponsorship and stuff with you know the gambling companies, we was going to say no, because it's something that doesn't sit right with the pair of us. And so what we've decided to do is go the complete opposite way and reach out to GamCare, and they've been super kind and in regards to what they do exactly, Blake, do you want to sort of give a little bit of information on that, and I'll pull up their details while you do that? So
absolutely. So as Stu said, if you are in any way suffering with bad gambling habits, gambling addiction, anything like that, then GamCare can offer a 24/7 helpline, not just for the person suffering with gambling addiction, but also if you're friends or a family member of someone that is gambling and it's affecting, you know, your relationship with them, if they're getting into debt, struggling to pay bills, anything like that, they think that they're going to win their next paycheck, anything like that, then they can speak to you as well. It's not just for them, but it's for family and friends as well. And also, if you want to, they can offer you free counseling sessions, again, not just for the person that it is affecting, but their family and friends as well. So it's a fantastic charity. They do brilliant work. If you are uncomfortable talking with someone on the phone or anything like that, they also do like a live chat thing as well. So yeah, they've got all the bases covered for that. And they're trained to give you, you know, some fantastic help. They're a really brilliant charity. Stu, have you got the number?
I have, yep. I mean, Blake just mentioned the live chat. So you need to head over to GamCare, that's GAMCARE, gamcare.org.uk, and you can just type in and have a natter on the live chat there. If you feel like you need to speak to someone directly over the phone, you can call free on 0808 8020 133. It's GamCare. Okay, thanks ever so much for listening. As mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we've been really lucky to have had Alexander Volkanovski on the podcast twice. We've had Dan Hooker on the podcast. We had him on his lead up to his fight with Arnold Allen, and there's some really fun bits of chat on that episode as well that involves, was it Dan Hooker's nan or Arnold's nan?
It was Arnold's nan, I believe, said, "Why have you got to fight someone so tall?"
That was it. Yeah, Nana Allen.
Nana Allen wasn't happy that Dan Hooker was so tall, but it didn't make a difference to Arnold Allen. He did well.
Absolutely. So go check out them episodes. Also, if you haven't realised yet, we put these episodes up on YouTube as well. So please head over and subscribe over on our YouTube channel, or just continue listening in the format that you do. Thanks ever so much for listening, and we will be back post-show. Well, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, the post-show?
We're not going to say too much now. We might have some issues with the post-show. We're hoping we're going to get it out to you and make it work, but there's some stuff going on, so we will do our best. But as I say, if for whatever reason we can't, we apologize, and we will obviously be trying to maybe get you some of the interviews or whatever that we've done. But we will do our best to get you a post show. And Stu, I've just sent you a picture of Nico Price's shoulders. So see what you think. I think they could be like,
what's wrong with his shoulder? What's wrong with them sunglasses?
Right. Well, ignore the sunglasses. Those shoulders could do damage. There's a lot going on with those shoulders.
That's quite weird.
I've got bony shoulders. But his shoulders come up where, like, you know, that Conor McGregor thing that he did to Donald Cerrone where he sort of broke his nose by doing the up shoulder thing. Nico Price should be all over that. Those shoulders look like they're going to do a lot of damage.
My God, I've never seen anyone's shoulders so close to their ears.
Yeah.
So weird.
All right, guys. Well, please do watch Nico Price versus Robbie Lawler, and please message us if you have any thoughts on Nico Price's shoulders. I don't know what's going on there. I'm a man with bony shoulders, but these are unique. There you go. Should we end it on that note?
Why not? See you next time.
Bye.